You are listening to the Robin of Sherwood podcast, Season 1, Episode 5, Ellen Adele. Hello everybody and welcome to the podcast. My name is Sietse Wilman and I'm the creator of this show, which is all about Robin of Sherwood. I discuss this classic TV series one episode at a time with my co-host Andy Chesney, who has Skyped in again for today. Andy, thank you for joining.
That's a pleasure. Yeah, hi mate. Yeah, nice to be back for Ellen Adele.
Yeah, Ellen Adele is the episode we're going to talk about today, which means we're almost getting close to the end of the first season. So let's just dive straight into the story. First thing we see is little John. He's walking through the forest. He's carrying a fishing rod and a bucket, but he's not going to do any fishing. He meets with Meg, which is his girlfriend from the village of Wickham. I don't know why, but there's this weird shot in it where the camera zooms in on an owl. Have you seen that? It's awkward.
It's very noticeable, isn't it? The owl, the big owl, and in fact the opening credits actually start right after the owl, don't they? It's kind of a strange opening. It's only a little scene, and it just kind of tells us that little John's been into the village, and we know for the first time here that he's got a girlfriend. Yeah. It's unclear at this stage whether Robin and his men know that little John's gone into Wickham or whether he sneaked off, and obviously we find out soon what the situation is. But at that point in the opening scene, we don't actually know whether they know or not. But
no, it's obvious he's like sneaking around and he's cautious. But the owl thing, I thought it was just a bit weird.
I'm not really sure what the point of that was.
Yeah, and then we hear Meg say, "Why? I don't know. Why do they call you Little John?" Which is quite a naughty joke, I think, for a family show.
Yeah. Yes, bit of innuendo. And I think another thing I've noticed with that opening scene, I always find the sound quality seems particularly poor. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. It's kind of footage-wise. It always, whenever I've watched it, and this goes for when it was back on video and even on the DVDs and that, I find the sound quality is quite poor in that opening scene. It does improve a bit throughout the episode. It seems okay for most of it, but I don't know if that's just me, but I always
I didn't notice it. But last time I watched it, I saw it on the Blu-rays. So maybe they fixed it, or maybe I'm just
the Blu-rays are certainly better. Yeah, but
I don't know if they did anything to the sound there. There's obviously some more production problems with this episode. I'm sure we're gonna get to that later. For now, at least we know that John has a little romantic time. There's a funny sequence there between John and Meg, as Meg asks about Robin and the legend surrounding him, and she has all kind of romantic images in her head about what life in the forest is like. And I like that bit because it shows us that Robin's legend is spreading already.
Yeah, it's nice to see that, isn't it? The villagers are already kind of, they're hearing stories about him, and obviously he's helped. By this stage he's probably helped a lot of the villagers too, but probably not Wickham by the way that Meg, obviously, she doesn't know Robin yet. So but yeah, it's quite funny, isn't it? She's like saying, they even say he can make himself invisible.
And it's funny how John reacts to that, like when she's like, and we can go off in the forest and we'll dance around the fires or something like that, and he goes just like, yeah, we're gonna do that.
He's just going along with it. He's just kind of just keeping Meg happy, really, just with small talk. Yeah.
He is. But then Gisborne shows up. He's after an illegal grain trader. That's why he's sent to the village, I believe. Anyway, he sees John, who escapes to the forest and hides in a tree. So that's how he makes his getaway. Then he gets back to the others in the camp. He tells them that he went fishing, but Robin, being Robin, obviously knows that something else is going on. and he knows that John has got a girlfriend, and he tells him not to go there again because it's too dangerous for the people of Wickham. I think he's quite strict on John. He's quite tough on him. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean it's hard for the Marys because obviously Robin's got his wife living with him in the band, and obviously it's almost like, and this is almost like a theme that goes on throughout the show. It's almost like the others aren't allowed a girlfriend. It's sort of like, I'm the leader can have, it's all right for Robin to have one. And in truth, Marion is she has proved herself as a worthy member of the of the band, a fighting member of the group. But yeah, it's clear that Robin doesn't really want, probably especially women. He doesn't want more of them in, joining the band. And it is a valid point he has about Wickham, because in truth, yeah, I mean, if Meg was to if she was found out, if it did come out that she was, having a relationship with one of the outlaws, then yeah, that would bring a lot of hassle to Wickham. The sheriff would really use that, and Gisborne against Wickham, for being in league with the outlaws. So yeah, Robin does have a point, but it is, yeah, it's a bit harsh on John, but.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, he can't expect those guys to live in the forest and never have any love life whatsoever. I mean, it's only natural that they want to have that.
I mean, they'd have to make sacrifices to live in the forest. I mean, obviously, once you become an outlaw, you've got to kind of separate yourself from those you love, haven't you? From the people you're close to. So basically, if they're close to anyone that's not an outlaw, potentially they're putting those people at risk. So if any of them had a brother, a sister, or just any family or girlfriends or whatever in any villages, it is putting them in danger. And I think what probably got Robin, don't forget, in this situation with Little John, the soldiers did actually they actually caught him. Well, they didn't catch him, but they actually spotted him and started chasing him into the forest. So of course, if Little John had been more careful, it might not be such an issue.
Yeah, but how could he be any more careful? I mean, he sneaked out there early in the morning, I think, or maybe it was in the middle of the night. I'm not quite sure. He was being careful.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, in terms of him actually sneaking out of Meg's hut, obviously he was clumsy because he fell over that thing, and that's what obviously brought his attention to Gisborne. But yeah, I mean, from Little John's point of view, he wasn't expecting Gisborne to be there at crack of dawn, was he? And it was quite, going back to the point you made earlier, because obviously Gisborne had arrived in the village, and I quite enjoyed seeing Gisborne throw his authority around there when he was you're lying in bed with the sun up, and this is how you serve your master, and it was quite good seeing.
He's really good at that.
Yeah, he really excels in that kind of thing. Robert Addy, Gisborne.
Yeah, true. In the end, John gives in to Robin. He admits that he hasn't really thought it through and hadn't really realized what a danger it could be for the villagers. After that, we see another like a slice of life in the forest. We see the Marys playing their forest games and practicing with a staff fight on the bridge, where Tuck knocks off Marion and Robin, and John lifts up the bridge. So he isn't sulking or anything. And then at that point, a guy on a horse rides through the forest singing. The outlaws stop him, as he's not a rich guy. In the end, he has nothing to fear from them. He's just a poor minstrel. They joke around with him a bit because, well, he isn't very, very good at singing, they think. But when he rides off, he announces that he's going to Nottingham to kill the sheriff, because the sheriff is going to marry his love, the daughter of a rich baron. And that, of course, sparks the interest of the outlaws.
Yeah, that draws his attention. So it was just a nothing encounter really up to that stage, and he was about to ride off. And then when he suddenly says, going to Nottingham, to kill the sheriff, and straight away, obviously, Robin's not just going to let that go. They need to find out what's going on. Just going back a little bit though to the staff fight, the scene, when they're playing around. There's a couple of observations I've got from that scene. Yeah, it was a nice fun little scene, that obviously seeing them all practice, and and obviously Friar Tuck, knocking them all in the water and that kind of thing. But did you notice how Robin, he's kind of, because the last time we saw him with the staff was obviously when he fought Little John in Robin Hood and the Sorcerer. And have you noticed how he's sort of showing off he seems to have some classy technique going on there, doesn't he? Have you noticed that how quick Robin's handwork is with that staff? When he takes on Tuck, he's really kind of like, flashing it about, and it's a way of telling us that that he does practice with the staff from time to time, and he seemed really confident with it, didn't he?
Yeah, no, I didn't really notice that, but I think it's a great observation, because that way we can see them improve, and I think all those scenes with them having those forest games, it's all about setting the atmosphere, but also making clear that they are practicing and they are getting better and they are serious about taking on this fight.
Yeah, it's also the only time in Series 1 you see Robin pretty much without his normal sort of tunic costume on the log, the staff fight. You see him in just his pale green. He hasn't got his normal tunic on in that. So that's just a little thing to note as well.
Wow, you always have those such a great eye for detail. That I always, after we've done the discussing an episode, I always feel like I have to rewatch it again, so I can pay attention to those things that you've picked out. That's interesting.
That's cool.
Anything else about the fight, or?
No.
So going back to Alan Adale and the way he's introduced. You mentioned the quality of the audio before. Now with Alan Adale, there's something strange going on as well. I've read that he's actually overdubbed.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, his voice was dubbed by Simon Shepherd. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like you wonder sometimes why people are cast in a role when they haven't got the voice to match it. It does seem a bit strange when you think about how many actors are actually out there. When you audition for a part, you've probably got a choice of actors you can take. It just seems strange in a way to take.
I believe that they decided to overdub him because he wasn't speaking clear enough. Well, that's why you have auditions, right?
I think Peter Hutchinson had a strong northern accent, or something. I don't know. They either way they didn't particularly like his voice. So yeah, it was dubbed. And he does sound like a gentle minstrel. He's certainly not a charismatic guy, is he? The Alan Adale we get in Robin of Sherwood. Do you agree with that?
No, and I think the whole overdubbing thing makes him feel a bit unnatural, and then especially the new voice he's gotten is like really overdone.
He's a bit dreary. Nice enough fella, but you almost sort of think you almost can't be bothered to sort of follow his situation through. You know what I mean? It almost has that kind of Alan Adale. Yeah, it's a nice episode, and it's a fun one, but it's probably one of the weakest Robin of Sherwood episodes in the whole show. It just doesn't really add many elements, all the sort of extra elements that Robin of Sherwood had in abundance. You don't really see any of that in this episode. It's almost like Richard Carpenter was. It's fair to say, he was a fan of the ballads. He did love a lot of the Robin Hoods, the original stories. So even though he's brought his own take to it, he's put his own twists on it and made it more exciting. But he was still very keen on the old ballads, and he obviously decided with Alan Adale that's what he wanted. He just wanted to convert the ballad into just quite a straightforward episode. And it works okay. It's a nice enough story, but it's just not that exciting as an episode. I always think it's the one episode you can watch in the whole thing where you just feel I just feel totally relaxed watching Alan Adale. It's almost like you kind of you just sort of feel that you've got nothing to worry about. You can actually just really enjoy the episode without having to think much, because there's not actually that much going on really in the whole story. It's quite straightforward. How would you view it?
Well, I do agree that it's one of the weaker episodes. I think it's the weakest episode in the first season, and I think a lot of the problem lies with Alan Adale itself. First of all, the character being overdubbed doesn't really make him sound and feel natural. Then the second problem I have with it is that he's so overdoing it. He's almost like a cartoon character, and I think that would work as like a funny sidekick, but not as the main person in this story that we have to. I don't feel for Alan Adale. I think he's a funny enough guy with his, "Ooh, I'm gonna do this and that with my mighty sword." It's funny, but I don't really care for him. And I think that's one of the biggest problems in this show, that he doesn't feel like a real human being that I want to feel for, and I want to see him do well and get his way in the end.
Yeah, he's a bit of probably not the nicest term, but sort of a bit of a drip. Do you know what I mean? Like, so people use that, it's a kind of phrase, wet drip sort of thing. He just hasn't got much about him. He's boring. He hasn't really got. There's just nothing to him really. You can tell that. Someone like Will wouldn't have much time for him, and there are just we do see slight hints of that later on. I think Will kind of loses patience just slightly, and he's the sort of character that would irritate Scarlett. Do you agree? Do you think?
Yeah, true. And I mean, it's okay to irritate Scarlett, but I think it's not okay if the character I'm supposed to care for irritates me a bit as well. I mean, it's funny, but I don't really care for him, and that's a very big problem for me in this episode, because, well, he's a very important character, and he sets off the whole story. And of course, the Marys are very surprised when they hear that the sheriff is going to get married. So Tuck blurts out, "Married, but the sheriff hates women." Right after that, we cut to a scene where sheriff is in the bath and has Gisborne rub him dry and stuff like that. It has caused some people to speculate that Dorano may be gay. Do you think he is?
As time's gone on, I'm more inclined to think he is. Actually, I think when I was younger, I wasn't too keen on the idea. I think there's a fair chance Dorano could be gay. It's never stated. We don't know for sure. We can only kind of form our own opinions. But he does seem to hate women, and he doesn't seem to have any kind of romantic throughout the whole series. Not just series one, first series, the whole show. You don't ever see any kind of fondness or kind of romance or interest at all, really, for him in women.
No, but we don't see him love anybody at all in the. Don't you think? I mean, he's not showing any affection to guys as well.
Oh, he's a right moody so-and-so. Yeah, I mean, just to compare, here's a comparison. If you were to compare Nick Grace's sheriff to, say, Alan Wheatley, the sheriff in the Richard Green stories. Alan Wheatley, it was clear that his sheriff, you could tell he found Marion attractive, because back in those days, like, Marion lived in the castle in that version. She would regularly go into the forest, but she was based in the castle. You could tell that the sheriff really liked Marion's company. She was an attractive girl, and even though he was much older than her, it wouldn't be hard to believe that the sheriff had feelings for her. So in that sense, you can look at previous sheriffs, and they're certainly not gay, I don't think. But yeah, there is a chance with Dorano he could be. But yeah, going back to his temper. So yeah, that's right. Again, we see him out of control losing control in the bath, losing his temper. He throws an apple at Gisborne.
Yeah, that's actually the moment I picked for this week to have a listen to. The sheriff's thoughts and feelings about his upcoming marriage.
Why on earth did I agree to be united in the unholy bonds of matrimony with a pansy-faced 16-year-old virgin? As if she still is a virgin, of course. Do you think it's worth the money, Gisborne? Could it possibly be worth 10,000 marks? Why don't you answer?
I assumed the question was rhetorical, my lord.
Never assume anything, Gisborne, except an occasional air of intelligence.
And when will the ceremony take place, my lord?
When I'm drunk enough to go through with it. Good night, Gisborne.
Yeah, so that's it. I've edited together a little bit here and there, but how do you feel about these comments he's making?
Yeah, the sheriff has some cracking lines in this episode. I think it's Nicholas Grace. He really kind of steals the show almost in this one. I think he sort of you could argue he maybe even saves the episode. I think Nicholas Grace is one of his very best performances as the sheriff, and that was really good to see, because it would have been a shame to see the episode descend into a farce, but actually that doesn't happen. It does remain a sensible episode, and because of the sheriff's bad tempers and his his general nature throughout the episode, and the way he's going about his plans and things, you can it does keep it a serious adventure, but it's just light-hearted in tone, the overall thing, that's all. But
I totally agree. He really saves this episode. He's got some really great lines, but also the way he delivers them, it's so awesome. He spits out the words, and he's just blurting out just the meanest things he can think of. And it was funny. And when I was watching this episode a few weeks ago, and my wife was with me in the room, and she's not really into Robin of Sherwood, but she was laughing out loud when stuff like this came on. It's so funny. He's so mean and such a nasty character. But then again, you can sort of pick up that the actor behind the character is really enjoying doing this somehow. I don't know. I really feel for the character, but I also feel for the actor.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Nicholas Grace he excels in this one, and yeah, I think he's clearly enjoying himself. As I say, this the standard. He just keeps it going right through the episode. These lines just keep coming out, and it's great to see. Like when he's insulting a bit later on, we see him like when Meg turns up in the castle, and the sheriff, he starts laying into her as well, and then he takes the mick out of Mildred's voice, oh, no appetite, and it's just it's brilliant. Yeah.
It's great stuff. Also, we've talked before about when Gisborne joined the service of the sheriff. I sometimes feel like the only reason that the sheriff took him on is because he needs someone to humiliate and to take down, and Gisborne is the perfect guy to do that with.
Yeah, it's kind of like the sheriff. It's like a win-win, isn't it? Having a deputy who you're always above, because it means that you can put responsibility on their shoulders. So in that sense, you can kind of designate a lot of the work you want doing to them. Robert Dorano is not a very hands-on sheriff at all. I mean, he's very much you see this again throughout the whole series. He's very much wanting the others to do, Gisborne and that to do his dirty work for him. He never really makes much effort to catch the Marys. He just, and yet he'll be the first to moan about it. When they do steal some money or when something goes wrong, he'll be the first to moan about it. But actually, what you feel like saying to him, well, what have you done about it? You're the guy in charge here, you're the boss of the Shire, you've got all the resources.
And besides that, he's the guy who hired Gisborne when in the very first episode he clearly states that Gisborne isn't smart enough to do his job the right way.
The sheriff, when he has these tantrums, it's poor Gisborne's often there next to him and having to sort of bear the brunt of it, and that just comes with being the deputy to a grumpy, nasty sheriff, really. But in the scheme of things, you have to remember that Gisborne would be well paid. At the end of the day, he's living there as well. He's got castle comfort. So I mean, it's not like Gisborne goes without. He's a horrible piece of work himself. So I don't really sympathise.
He gets to shout at the villagers, which I think is really important to him. He needs somebody to bark at. Right. So back in the forest, Robin and Ellen Adele have a conversation. Robin tells him to forget about his girlfriend. So he's just a minstrel, and she's the daughter of a baron. That's a bit of a strange comment. I mean, who is he to say anything? He's an orphan brought up by a miller, and he's married the daughter of Sir Richard of Leeford. So that's a bit strange. It's like the second time he does that. I mean, first he tells off John for having a girlfriend while he's married to Marion, who lived with him in the forest, so it's easy for him to say. And now he tells of Ellen.
Yeah, no, I agree. You could argue it sounds a bit rich coming from Robin, doesn't it? I think there's just there is a bit of arrogance there with Robin of Locksley sometimes, and that does come through. He's a very likable character, commanding leader, and he's a great guy, great. He's a brilliant Robin Hood, perfect Robin Hood, I think. But everybody has slight faults, and I guess perhaps that's one you could just pick in Locksley's character. If you were to say what are his faults, then maybe that's possibly it. That actually sometimes, not often, but just sometimes he probably forgets, actually, hold on, just remember where you've come from, your background, and and you're an outlaw as well, so you're not really in any place to kind of be putting down other people's positions or ambitions, or
But luckily enough for Alan, Marion steps in and she makes a case for helping Alan. Well, most of all because Mildred would have a terrible life with the sheriff, but also because she makes a case for giving love a chance, and they realize that there's a lot of money involved because John was seen in Wickham. The sheriff has gave them a really big fine, so they're in trouble there. So they need money to help out the villagers. So that's their motivation to get involved.
It's nice to see Marion kind of sticking up for Mildred in a way, because we have to remember, don't forget, Marion's only 17 in this first series, and she used to live in the castle, obviously with the sheriff and that. So Marion particularly, this is why I think she's quite strong in her feelings about them helping Mildred and Alan and preventing this marriage, because she knows particularly how bad the sheriff is. She knows from living in the castle, and she can really picture just what sort of awful life it would be for Mildred. So yeah, it's nice to see that from Marion, and it's realistic as well, because that's how she would feel about it.
So they decide to rescue Mildred, who is at that moment going to be escorted by Gisborne to Nottingham Castle. So we have this fight between them. Then Robin and Gisborne end up fighting in the mud, which is quite a legendary scene, I think, from the show.
Yeah, it's a terrific mud fight, isn't it? And it's just thoroughly enjoyable to watch. It's revolting, seeing them just squirm around, and they're having to pull their own feet out of the mud, just their own boots out of the mud, just to kind of move. And it's it's pretty disgusting, but it's very enjoyable, and it's just nice to see that kind of scene in Robin of Sherwood, because generally speaking, it's not, as I've sort of touched on earlier, it's not a light-hearted show by any means, really, but it's nice that you get to see a bit of that from time to time, and Alan a Dale was kind of the perfect episode for it, being the sort of what I'd class as the nice episode. So yeah, you can put like a silly scene like that in this one.
That's the scene that you've picked as your favorite to throw in there as an audio clip. So we're gonna have a listen to a small fragment of that.
Gisborne, stop playing around in the mud and come up here. You look like a decaying dung heap. Keep downwind of me, for the love of Christ.
And that last line from the sheriff, it always cracks me up. I've seen it quite a lot of times, and I always think it's funny how he totally humiliates Gisborne there.
Yeah, the decaying. You look like the decaying dung heap one. Yeah, and it actually starts with
and they had to shoot this scene twice, right?
They did, and it's unbelievable actually when you hear that, because if you think about it, on average, the chances of the footage getting damaged, for any scene is quite rare. It would be quite unusual. It's not unusual for there to be several takes or a few takes on a scene. We know that's how production works. There's always going to be takes involved. But for the actual original footage, footage to be lost is or damaged rather is careless. And to think of all scenes for it to happen, for Michael Praed and Robert Addy to have it in that awful mud scenes, it must have been awful for them having to do it again. It starts also just literally that mud fight sequence. I always think there's a great stunt as well by Robin when he jumps as he's catching up with because he overtakes Mildred and then obviously catches up with Gisborne, and then you see him fling himself from his horse obviously right onto Gisborne's, and that's how they both fall. Now presumably that would have been the stunt man, again Michael Praed's double, Wayne Michaels, who did that, because that was actually quite dangerous. But yeah, and then what do you think? what do you think of those soldiers, the crossbow shots? That obviously Robin's not at this point. He's swimming away quite slowly as well. He's not, because he's tired, and you can clearly see he's not exactly quick to get away as he's swimming. And those those soldiers that are firing the crossbow, they don't seem to get anywhere near him, do they?
No, the soldiers are worthless. They're always worthless. They're like the Stormtroopers, they run around, but they're just, never effective. Well, I think the only time when we see the soldiers hit the target is when Robin father is getting killed, when they have him totally surrounded and are only at just a few feet of distance. And with Robin himself, of course, so they can only hit a target when they're really close to it and it's unarmed.
And also and it's noticeable that on both those occasions, with Robin and his father being killed, that they're both standing completely still as well. So it's like it's almost like the soldiers can only do their job basically if you literally just stand there for them, and then they can just about manage to shoot you, But Robin and Sherwood, I think they did seem to enjoy. They like to portray the soldiers being incompetent, didn't they? I always thought that was kind of a little theme that ran through the series. You often see incompetence from the soldiers, and of course, they have to do things like that deliberately because it then gives the sheriff, funny lines, so he can sort of shout at them and take the mick. It's all part of the, of how the episodes are written. But it is. It's quite telling that you often see how incompetent they are.
Yeah. By the way, I was comparing them to the Stormtroopers from Star Wars. In the second to last Star Wars movie, I don't know if you've seen them or if you're into Star Wars at all, but there we get to see the story of one of the Stormtroopers behind the mask. It would have been interesting if Robin of Sherwood once had a soldier becoming a real character, and we're getting to know a bit of their backstory. I mean, how did they become a soldier? What does their life look like in the castle? Something like that. It would have made a great addition, I think. Yeah,
it's an interesting angle because that's certainly never been explored in Robin and Sherwood. Yeah, I mean, you could even have had, that's right, or you could have had a story where like a soldier, perhaps a soldier ends up becoming an outlaw or something, like something happens to them in the castle, some sort of bad treatment. Maybe a soldier, you could have had a story where like the sheriff or Gisborne perhaps kill one of the soldiers' own family or something, and when they find out, they just can't bear to carry on working as a soldier, for example, and they end up rebelling and end up becoming kind of like an outlaw or something like that, and then you sort of get to hear their story and things like that. I mean, I don't recall that being done in any of the Robin Hoods, really. None that spring to mind, but good idea, interesting point.
Well, maybe in the new audio stuff, we don't know what's going to be in there yet, but I don't think they're going to go for that angle. But for now, like you said, they're totally incompetent, and they let Robin get away, and they think they have also gotten their hands on the money. But then they realize that the sheriff has outsmarted them because he had taken the money to him through another route. And Robin and his men are really upset by this. And I think it's pretty nice to see that the sheriff is smart and he's already counting on Gisborne failing to do his job. And he already knows that the outlaws are probably going to get involved in this. So I think it's good to have that in there.
It is, and it, like you say, it just shows that the sheriff is actually thinking ahead, and it's almost like he's prepared for Gisborne failing, and he's probably, because up to this point, obviously in the series, the he's probably had a few of these sort of situations, and we've seen similar things, haven't we? I mean, it's like Witch of Elston, Yes, the sheriff's not prepared to let it happen again. Well, certainly not in this episode. He has it sent via a different route, and it's quite good seeing it. It just kind of shows that the Merrys they don't always get their own way, because again, if these were half-hour episodes, just like the old sort of black and white ones were, that kind of thing, it's quite often, it just pans out and it's always like a victory for Robin and his men or something like that. But no, Robin and Sherwood, it does kind of balance it out a little bit. You do get some stalemates sometimes, and obviously things, there are little plans. Sometimes the outlaws' plans do get stopped, or
Yeah, and it
get
makes
affected.
the danger they have to fear from the sheriff also a bit more real, I think, because if you have like a really dumb sheriff, then they're always going to win, and now you still have the feeling that they'll probably win, but you have a sense of danger from the sheriff because he's also smart and realizing what's going on, so he can make a plan to counter that. By the way, I was a bit mistaken before because it's only at this point that they hear of the fine that Wickham has to pay, because Meg shows up and he tells them about it. So I was mistaken before, and that means that the outlaws, well, they feel responsible for it because it was John who got the villagers in trouble. So now they realize that they're really gonna have to get their hands on the money. Then we see how badly the Reno treats Mildred already. Like you said, he mocks her with her voice, and he's just giving her a terrible time. He also seems to enjoy haunting her, like when he says, "Good night, my dear. Dream of tomorrow's consummation." Nasty thing to say to her.
Yeah, the whole thing must just be like a terrifying prospect for Mildred. It's and how can I possibly disappoint my bride? Another of his lines in there.
And then Meg enters the room. She's there to warn the sheriff that she has heard that the outlaws are going to attack the castle the next day during the wedding. And she wants to make a bargain with the sheriff for him to lift the vine on the village and trade that for his chance to catch the outlaws. The sheriff is having nothing of it. He has her sent away immediately. But it's clear that he does believe that the Marys are up to something.
It's quite funny how quick how he cuts Meg short so quickly. Straight away. She's barely into her sentence. If you could pardon the village, my lord, straight away he's like, get lost. He's not having any of it. Throw her out. But yeah, I mean, once Meg leaves the room, obviously, you then hear him discuss it with Gisborne a bit more, and obviously, it becomes clear that the sheriff is aware that actually the Marys could be plotting something, but he's just in a very grumpy mood this episode, and he was no way he was going to be bargaining with villagers. So
yeah, and he's right. The Marys are up to something. At this point, we don't know their plan exactly. But we see that they have figured out who will marry the sheriff to Mildred, and we see them dress up. We see them load bees into a cart. So we know that there's some plan being formed and executed there. Meanwhile, Nottingham is getting ready for the wedding. There's this funny scene with Gisborne, who is rehearsing the cheering with his men. That always brings a smile to my face when he says like 1, 2, 3. Cheer!
Yeah, it's funny that.
And then Alan goes into the castle and presents himself as Father Matthew, the priest that will do the wedding. Meanwhile, Marion and Mudge ride a cart into the castle grounds, dressed up as women. So we know that this is going to be like the climax of this episode. It's all going to happen during the wedding.
When Marion and Mudge turn up at the castle, there's and you see some scenes in the castle, with all the people, the busy market, all the people gathering round. There's actually some reused footage that they've put in there from Robin Hood and the Sorcerer at the archery contest. So all those sort of regulars, all those kind of extras that were that we see at Alnwick Castle in Robin Hood at the archery contest. They actually use some of those same. Not all of them, but yeah, they use quite a lot of those same scenes and put them in. So I don't know if you noticed that, but that's just something I'd.
Yeah. And then we see how Gisborne fetches Mildred. That's also quite a gentle moment, I think, when she talks about love, referring to Ellen, of course. And Gisborne also again shows his softer side. He doesn't cut her off or anything.
So I think even you sort of see a more human side to Gisborne. It's almost like he knows he knows that this life isn't for Mildred, and obviously Gisborne himself knows what a bad man the sheriff is really, and you can tell he does sympathise with Mildred, but obviously he's just not in a position to do anything about it. You know, he can't get his hands dirty, he can't stop the marriage. You know, it's not in his interests, and he works for the sheriff. So, but it was nice seeing just a little moment there from Gisborne.
And a few moments later, Mildred finds herself face to face with Alan, who is disguised as the priest. And that's a funny bit there. Again, I think there's some humor when Alan starts with the blessing and the sheriff corrects him, and he's making a really horrible performance as a priest.
Yeah, it's a hopeless performance from Alan, playing Father Geralvis. But he just about stumbles through it, doesn't he? And then obviously, Scarlett sort of saves the day just in time. You know, he calls out outlaws, you know, in the castle, and just in time before they get married. So, and that's just what Robin wants. It's all part of the plan. And then the diversion happens, and obviously Gisborne sends his men all over the place, and it all starts getting a bit messy, a bit chaotic, and obviously, you know. Yeah. And then Robin reveals himself because he's one of the monks disguised up on the stage, and obviously he then appears to the sheriff. And
it doesn't make a lot of sense to me the way they make their getaway, because he draws his sword at the sheriff, and I think that would be enough to get away safely. I mean, if he puts his sword on the throat of the sheriff, he could easily say, well. Everybody stand aside. We're off, or I'll kill the sheriff. But he's not going for that this time. Of course, we have seen that before, so I think they didn't want to pull the same trick twice. Instead, they come up with the plan with the bees.
Yeah, those lovely bees. Yeah, not one of the best special effects we see. I mean, obviously, Rob.
I think that's the greatest understatement we've used so far in the podcast.
I mean, they were huge, weren't they? These huge black blobs that you just see on the screen. I mean, it's one of those moments where that just kind of showed a little bit where Robin of Sherwood was just a bit of its time again. You know, every now and then there was always going to be one of those scenes that just kind of dated it a little bit, you know, in the 80s or whatever. And that bee scene just
but even in the 1980s there must have been a way to have more realistic bees on screen.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, there must have been. I guess. And there was always a big budget. You know, Robin Sherwood always had a decent budget behind it, but for some reason they just didn't really. They didn't really have anything. It was very lacking. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and in my opinion, they really dropped the ball there. Although I really do like the idea of bringing back the bees again. We have seen Marion work with bees in the very first episode. We actually got a comment on Facebook that we didn't talk about that when we discussed Robin Hood and the Sorcerer Part 1, that we didn't comment it on the first time we get to see Marion working with those bees and then putting her costume down, and we get the first look at her face, which was a really pretty scene. And I do feel like it's nice to have this sort of consistency, that we know that there are bees around and they have somebody who knows how to work with them. So I do like the idea, and I get why it's written in there, but just the way it's been done visually, it's really, really awful.
Yeah, it is disappointing that they couldn't pull it off better. It is what it is, and what can you do?
I was comparing it to Star Wars earlier. They've touched up some old movies with some new special effects. I don't think that's really worked. So I don't advise anybody to go back to this old episode and put in some more realistic bees or anything. I mean, it's become part of the episode now, but it's not the best moment of the show. That's for sure. For the marriage, it does work. they get back to the forest. Alan and Mildred are married there, so love conquers all. That's for sure. Everything seems to be all right, but then they found out that the stolen treasure contains nothing but stones. So once again, the sheriff has tricked them. He's quite pleased with himself that in the end we see him in the bathtub with Gisborne. He's stung all over his body by the bees, but he's happy that he has the money and he didn't even have to get married for it. So he's quite satisfied.
Yeah, we didn't have to marry that silly girl, as he puts it, kind of thing. Yeah, so it's actually a pretty good outcome for the sheriff, apart from his point of view, apart from actually getting stung all over by the bees. It's actually worked out quite well for him. The Marys, again, Robin and his men, you could sort of argue they got the main objective was achieved in that they stopped the wedding, and that was the main purpose. But obviously, they got no money out of it. But there we do see right at the end there, obviously, because Robin, you can tell he's still feeling bad, and he's kind of like, what about the villagers of Wickham? And but Mildred kindly hands over the sheriff's necklace that he gave her, and of course that would be worth loads, So yeah, it is actually a good outcome for them in the end, because they can sell. That's right, they can sell Mildred's necklace, and that more than pays the fine for Wickham. So yeah, they still did get money out of it.
I think the biggest losers of this episode are the parents of Mildred. We don't get to see them, but they've lost the money. They've lost their daughter, who they'll probably never see again. So I think the whole thing turns out the worst for them. Would you agree?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think it does. It's interesting to note in the next episode, her father, the Baron de Bracy, he's actually pushing for the sheriffship when King Richard arrives. So you do hear, her father's mentioned in the next one.
Also, what I like is when we see Alan and Mildred riding off. I feel like there's this theme of how the legend of Robin is getting formed and spread across the country again. I mean, I think Alan will probably sing ballads about Robin Hood and his encounter with him, and tell stories all over the country. And I think that's pretty awesome, because we've seen that before in the beginning when Meg was talking about Robin. So we really get a sense that the legend is spreading and the stories are getting out there.
Yeah, and I think the first series was very much about that. It was very much these episodes are sort of they're spreading these tales of Robin and his men, and the success they're having and the adventures they're kind of going on. So I kind of feel that's what series one was sort of geared towards. It was almost a bit more, I think the episodes were a bit more gentle. Not, obviously there were still gritty episodes, like Robin Hood and the Sorcerer and Seven Poor Knights, but I think it did seem to have just a slightly softer edge to it, and I think it was more about just establishing. It was almost like in series one they wanted to establish the legend of Robin Hood quite a lot, quite strongly, and building. It was very much building this reputation that Robin Hood has, and then when we move into series two, that's when Robin and Sherwood really comes into its own, and it just gets even more exciting. It's just fantastic, series two. It just gets really exciting, and it goes much deeper and darker even, and it's but yeah, series one is a very nice self-contained, it works well as a mini-series, and it's these are good stories to just kind of set the ball rolling.
Yeah, and I like the way that they explain how the story inside the story is getting spread through the country, and it's that's going to come up on the next episode as well in the King's Fool, how far their legend has spread already. Still, I think this is, like we said before, one of the weaker episodes. There's some production problems with the audio, with the overdubbing. With the effects of the bees zooming around, which don't look convincing at all to me. So I think it's a shame what they did to the character of Alan Adale, which I like, and he's in the like you said, he's in the original ballads. At the moment, I just started reading the book by Donald Angus, I think he's called, about the Hooded Man. Outlaw. It's the Outlaws series. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't actually, no, but
it's this really gritty version of the story. Robin is doing cruel things as well.
Yeah.
I just started it, and Robin has also done some horrible things. But the narrator in the books is Alan Adale. So all the books, I think, are from his perspective. And I think it's too bad that in Robin of Sherwood he only shows up once in not a very convincing way. He's like a throwaway character. And I think they could have done more with that. So I'm a bit disappointed.
They could have done. Yeah, I mean, Alan Adale had a lot of potential. Obviously, he's a well-known character in the legend, in the stories, the myths, and everything. And then, I mean, they could have done more with him. He could definitely have been a guest character that comes back again. Potentially, he could have even been one of Robin's band. I don't think that would have worked for Robin of Sherwood, not just because of the guy Peter Hutchinson who was cast, but I just think in general, Robin of Sherwood was a small, a tough, gritty band, and a minstrel probably wouldn't really suit them that well. But either way, the character was disappointing in this version, unfortunately. And there was just it is a bit of a shame because there is a lot of Alan Dale. There is a lot of potential there. It's interesting how series 3, how the BBC Robin Hood actually used Alan Adale was one of their regular Marys, wasn't he? One of the band in their story. He was a very prominent character in that BBC version.
Yeah, he actually doesn't show up in a lot of the original ballads, but I think we get to see quite a lot of him in most adaptations of the Robin Hood story. Maybe because it's a good tool to tell the story. I mean, it's handy to have a storyteller in your story, like the Outlaw series I just mentioned. Anyway, I agree with you that it's a good choice not to have him join the band, but it would have been an interesting character to show up every now and then, but not in this version. I'm happy we don't get to see this Alan Adale again later on.
Yeah, me too.
Right, so that leaves us with just one more thing to do, which is to hand out the arrows for this episode 1 to 5. Have you already made up your mind?
Well, I'd still give three arrows.
Yeah, I was somewhere between 2 and 3, and I've decided to give 3 as well. But it's gained a complete extra point just by the performance of Nick Grace in this, because he spits out his lines in a great way, and I think it's by far the funniest episode from the whole series, and that's worth something as well. So that kind of saves the day for me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that brings it to an end score of 3 arrows, which is the lowest we've handed out this far. But still, it's good enough. It's 3 out of 5. It's not that bad.
No, and I think this is the thing. I think Robin of Sherwood is such a high quality series that, I mean, I don't think any episodes will probably get a really low ranking because I just think there's so much quality in each episode. There's always, it's always going to be probably at least at an average, it's going to be hard to get an episode less than 3 hours, I think.
So that brings us to the end of this episode. As always, I want to thank you, Andy, for joining in, and I also want to thank Bram Brouwers for playing our theme music. We're getting close to the end of the first season, so next time we're going to talk about the last one, which is The King's Fool. Now we can't say too much about it just yet, but we are working on some bonus episodes after that of this podcast with some special guests. We hope to be able to confirm that pretty soon. To stay up to date about stuff like that, you might want to like us on Facebook. You can do that on facebook.com/Sherwood Podcast. You can also leave a note there for us or send us an email on sherwoodpodcast@gmail.com. We don't know on what device you are listening to this right now, but if you are using an app that gives you the chance to hand out stars, please give us some. Please give us just a bit more than Alan Adale just got from us. And the more positive reviews we get, the more people we can reach. So that's pretty important to us. For now, thank you for listening. We hope you tune in next time, and may Hearn protect you.
Are you ready? Deep breath. Cheer! Hey! We'll try that again. On the command, cheer. Cheer!
Hey! Are you trying to be funny, Gisborne?